Thank you, panel of adjudicators, for the floor. It was that famed juggernaut of justice, Martin Luther King Jr., who once said, "The moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice." It is in light of this quote that we stand affirmative on the resolution that the NFL should allow players to kneel during the national anthem. My argument today will be doing three main things. First, I'll give you an argument that shows the moral obligation of the NFL to allow players to kneel. Second, the purpose of speaking truth to power. And finally, a defense of our value in today's round. But before I continue, I wanted to extend a round of thank yous to my partner for helping me to construct a wonderful speech, to Team Rwanda for participating in today's debate, and finally to the lovely audience, for without you, we might as well be debating in an empty classroom. So with all that in mind, a few definitions are in order. By this House, I mean the advocacy of the room. That is what the audience agrees on in today's round will win today's debate. Second, by the NFL, we mean the National Football League. And by kneeling during the national anthem, we mean the symbolic gesture used as a means of communicating oppression that individuals face and continue to face in the status quo. Today, our value will be that of restorative justice, which we define as rectifying the past injustices against marginalized communities, in particular, that of police brutality. With all that in mind, we have three observations. Observation number one, the NFL is an American corporation. Observation number two, today's debate is not a legal question of whether or not football players have freedom of speech. We know this because it is guaranteed by the First Amendment. Nor is this a legal case about whether or not the NFL is required to allow their employees to engage. We are asking a moral question of whether or not the NFL ought to allow them to do so. So with all that in mind, let's dance. Argument number one, the moral imperative of the NFL to allow individuals to kneel. Subpoint A. In his groundbreaking work on liberty, John Stuart Mill postulated his famous conception of liberty grounded in the harms principle, which states that liberty extends insofar as and up until it infringes upon the liberty of others. So, in other words, my right to swing my fists wildly ends where your nose begins. Subpoint B. When discussing the harms principle, we can draw a distinction between offense and harm. By offense, we simply mean something that somebody might agree or might not like to agree with. And by harm, we mean any reasonable foreseeable physical danger that might occur as a result of something that somebody says. If you want an example of this, simply look to the famed Supreme Court case Schenck versus the U.S., where the Supreme Court decided that speech is restricted in a situation where somebody screams fire in a crowded theater. The point of this is to show, according to Mill's conception of liberty, and later as written in American law, the only time it is justified to restrict the liberty of others is if it constitutes actual harm. Subpoint C. Therefore, the moral liberty of football players is currently being restricted by the NFL unjustifiably because they aren't causing anyone physical harm. In other words, they don't violate John Stuart Mill's harm principle. So why should the NFL allow kneeling? We can see this because recall in my observation number 3, the NFL is uniquely situated to deal with the impacts between the relations of police officers and communities that are individuals who comprise of the African American communities. I said this because many of the football players in the National Forensic League come from major cities in the United States, such as New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles that have been plagued by police brutality and historically oppressive institutions. Their families and friends have to deal with this every day. And they simply want to use their position to advocate for positive change, and we believe that the NFL has a moral obligation to support their advocacy because they make millions of dollars from the work of Hispanic and African American athletes. Subpoint D. But this is only the first step. The owners of the NFL ought also to be taking a knee after along and beside their players in the same way that Jerry Jones did in the Cowboys versus Cardinals game in September of 2017. Subpoint E. So judges, opponents, and members of the audience, in history, we have seen the progression of differing opinions come together to forward change. So even if some take offense, the impact of kneeling will allow for individuals to start a conversation and allow change to happen. The negative impacts of not allowing this will be threefold. It will limit freedom of consciousness, it will restrict liberty unjustifiably, and necessarily harm the purpose of the democratic process. Argument number 2, the purpose of speaking truth to power. Subpoint A. We see in communities across the country that acts of police brutality have galvanized the American people to take action against institutional failures that led to the oppression of Black communities. This is why we had a civil rights movement in the 1960s and a Black Lives Matter movement in 2018. Subpoint B. These historical inequalities have led to the voices of people like Colin Kaepernick being silenced in order to put a bandage on the bullet wound that perpetuated historical injustice. So, what we see today is companies like Nike who take a stand to support those who are part of historically marginalized communities but wish to speak up and actually forward change. So, subpoint C, this is why we conclude that the NFL should work with their players rather than silencing them. Because while football players want to take action, the audience of the NFL is unaware of the problems within minority communities, and for them, ignorance is bliss. Subpoint D. Thus, the moral obligation falls to the National Football League because of all of these unique factors to elevate the voices of the marginalized and the masses of the people yearning to breathe free. So with that in mind, let's move on to argument number 3, the superiority of the value of restorative justice. Subpoint A. Look to the value I stated at the top of the case of that, I'll get to at the end of my analysis, of restorative justice, which we defined as rectifying past injustices against marginalized communities. Subpoint B. Our value is both more fundamental and weighty. Subpoint C. We know this because we have seen hitherto patterns of historical injustice leading to oppression in the status quo. The only way, audience members, you can enable change is to allow for individuals to speak up and use their voice to start the conversation. Subpoint D. And the people in power participate most uniquely in this case, and most prominently that of the National Football League. And subpoint E, we know, judges and audiences and opponents in today's debate, that the people united will never be defeated. So say it with me. The people united will never be defeated. The people united will never be defeated. So with all of this in mind, you will strongly but kindly urge a vote for side affirmation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate the House for being here, and I would like to take this opportunity to appreciate the people from Rollins for having been with us for the past 2 days. It's amazing. It's always hard to speak after you've had more than 100 hears in the House. It's always hard to know where to start from, but it's fine, I'll try. Coming from Africa, having a direct connection with the Black Americans in the House, this is a matter that really matters to me because the oppression, the social injustice that you go through, I feel it like a brother. Now, I want to start by explaining exactly something that the leader of the government did not touch, but maybe they will try to talk about it in their coming speech. Let's analyze the first impact, the first reason NFL exists. NFL is an institution of America, in America, yes, but it's not there for the government. And it is not there on behalf of the Congress. So, saying that NFL is limiting or silencing the people from their right to speak something, I do not agree with it. Because the First Amendment clearly states it, that the Congress shall not make no laws in respecting the implication or application of anything, which means that if NFL is taking steps to try to reduce the kneeling in the football, the kneeling in the within the players, it's not that they're silencing the freedom of speech of their players. Rather, let's analyze what are the effects that kneeling brings back to the NFL. And let's also analyze, is kneeling the best way to bring about social justices that they are claiming about? Now, NFL today, it's facing 13% decrease in its viewership. So, if they allow people to kneel, but at the end of the day they are losing money to keep running the activities that they run day to day, what is the impact again at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen? Let's analyze. You allow people to kneel, but there is no sustainability in what you're doing or the platforms they have to kneel, because you're going to lose a lot of money and you won't be able to employ them so that they can have right platforms. Those people that kneel every day when they're playing, they have followers on their social media, millions and millions, where they can post. They live in societies whereby people are suffering day and night. But is kneeling the best thing they can do to help social injustices, to stop them from happening? They can do better. Kneeling is the least thing they can do to help social justice to happen. First of all, I would like to ask, and I will not answer this question, maybe I'll give the government the time to come and try to help you. What has been the achievement of kneeling ever since it started in 2016? What has been achieved through that? We've seen people, black people like Kanye West, standing up and abusing fellow Africans, fellow black Americans, saying that 400 years of slavery was a choice, and now we are just going, saying that kneeling is something that we should really be concerned at this point. No. NFL does not stop these players from protesting or showing that they disagree with what is happening. According to the law that has been passed by the NFL this year, it says that if you do not want to stand up for the national anthem, there is one thing that we can allow you to do. You can better stay in the locker room and don't come show up. Isn't that enough than coming up and not standing up for the flag? You have kids who are 13 years old in the public who are watching you not standing up for the flag that more than 1 million Americans died for you to have the right to sing the national anthem up to today. If we are to analyze better this issue, we will realize that even if they are considering the harm to be the ultimate harm, the ultimate harm on physical cause, we cannot say that the harm is only physically. There is the mental change that you are affecting as a player who is considered as a mentor to the kids in public. There is an ultimate harm that you're causing. Now, another thing, saying that the NFL has a moral obligation. It has a moral obligation, but if your morals are affecting your day-to-day life, is it becoming a moral or it's becoming a loss because you're investing in something that you know is going to help you in the future days? I'll take your point of information after addressing the House. Now, ladies and gentlemen, after trying to talk about what the government today is proposing, I will say that as long as we are not seeing the effects of this kneeling within football players, we should be thinking of another thing to do as people who are affected daily by the social injustices in the society. We should be thinking something else, another step that we take to make sure that the police know that we suffer. And we should be thinking about something that does not bring divisionism within football or within sports. Sport is supposed to be that one thing that unites people. After seeing all the tweets of the president, after hearing all the lies from the Congress, after hearing all the women that are being raped day to day, and the Congress goes ahead to vote for people, to vote for rapists to go in the to become the justice of the nation, we should be thinking of something bigger than kneeling in a football court to just show that we disagree and we do not agree with what is happening. I'll take your point of information. Anything in this world cannot make everyone comfortable. There is nothing that can be done that makes people comfortable. If we are to talk about being uncomfortable, we are even uncomfortable to speak after your greatest speech of your opening leader of the opposition. We cannot look for policies, we cannot look for actions that make everyone in the society feel comfortable. That has never happened in the world that we live in today. Allowed. Yeah.
So your statistic of the 13% that a moral argument?
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are analyzing each and everything that kneeling of the players can bring about in the NFL. Let it be the moral part, let it be the practical part, but the moral drives what comes into practice. Because if they allow them to kneel, if they allow them to kneel, if they allow them to keep kneeling, how does the viewership reduce? It reduces because not everyone within the football allows with them. Not everyone agrees with them. We still have people who think that kneeling is bad. According to statistics, only the young people below the age of 24, 56% are the only ones who believe that kneeling is effective. How about the 44% and the 13% that is reducing up to today? Now, we cannot separate the moral from the practical because they are all influenced by each other. If we talk of the moral, we should put in consideration of the practical. We cannot ignore that because we want our morals to work first than considering that people need to be united by something like sports, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Now, I'm not actually going to open up with some Chinese, but I am going to open up with a little Spanish. There's a famous Spanish idiom that goes, ojos que no ven, corazón que no siente, which means eyes that don't see, hearts that don't feel. And what the NFL and side opposition is trying to do is pull the wool over the eyes of the American people and keep them from truly understanding the issue today. So I am going to be standing in firm affirmation of the resolution that the NFL should allow players to kneel during the national anthem. Now I'm going to be doing 3 things for you all today to just further illustrate this issue. First, I'm going to talk about what protest is and what it actually means for the American people. Second, I'm going to talk again about the unique situation of the NFL to not only change the minds of the players or to change the minds of the people watching or the fans that have been devoted, but for the whole American population. And then finally, I'm going to talk about the true worth of restorative justice and why we really need to be doing something for the people in our country who have been fighting for everything. And before I do any of that, I'd like to start off with a round of thank yous. First, I'd like to thank Team Rwanda for that excellent response to our case. I'd like to thank my partner Sunny for helping me come up with this excellent clash. To you, panel of adjudicators, and our audience for your both serving the same purpose. For without you, we wouldn't be able to have this discussion today, and again, we'd be debating in an empty room. So with that, let's begin. Argument 1, kneeling and what protest means to the American people. Subpoint A. So then there's been a lot of discussion in this round about whether or not, 1, kneeling is an effective form of protest, 2, whether or not the same effect can be had if they just stay in the locker room, and 3, whether or not protest should actually be having a certain role to the American people. So subpoint B, what do I want to talk about with this? Protest has never been something that is comfortable. Protest is not meant to make you feel better about something. It is meant to make the people who are doing something wrong actually understand that it is wrong. So what we have in the United States is a culture where we have police brutality, we have historically oppressive systems, and we have issues that plague minority groups and oppressed groups in the United States every day. Subpoint C, but before people started to kneel, before people tried to push to the front of the bus, and before people had sit-ins and lie-ins and die-ins, nobody did anything about it. So what we need to see is that even though those people who were on the bus felt uncomfortable when Rosa Parks did not want to give up those seats, even when the players kneeled during the national anthem, and even when people sat at this different side of the counter when they were in a restaurant, yes, it made the other people uncomfortable because they knew they were doing something wrong. So what you see with protest is that it's not meant to serve as a form of comfort. It's not meant to serve as a way to bolster sales for the NFL. What it's meant to serve as a method to push change for a country. And the only way you push change is when you outline that what someone is doing is wrong and what you need to fix. Also, the first speaker for the opposition side talked about how the children might feel when you have someone kneeling during the national anthem, or whether or not this sets a good example in the United States. The example we need to set is, if something is wrong, say something. Not if something is wrong, stay silent. We need people to know that when there is an issue, you can fight back against it, and not that you should accept the position you were put in society. So this is going to respond to the issue of what protest should do, and whether or not the NFL should stay in its comfy situation where people can enjoy their football game while forgetting the issues that are plaguing hundreds of thousands of people in the United States every day. So now my second argument is going to be the unique situation of the NFL to push that change. Subpoint A. They brought up the example of what the policy has been done to change this. Okay, if you wanted to kneel, instead just stay in the locker room. Recall my quote at the top of the case. If people don't see the actions that are being taken, they don't actually know that it's being done. So what we see, subpoint B, is that by putting these people in the locker room, by saying you can't actually kneel, nobody knows a protest is going on. Say I watch football this Sunday. I don't normally watch football. I'm not even sure how many people are on a football team. Therefore, I'm not going to know that there's somebody missing because they're in the locker room. And then that way, the average American citizen, not the diehard fans, the moms and dads who watch football every Sunday with their dog dressed up in a Steelers outfit, are actually not going to know that there's something being done. So what we see is that subpoint D, this is the unique situation of the NFL. The NFL has hundreds and thousands of viewers, whether or not their viewership is dropping in general, because we still see that there is a large portion of the American population, whether they be fans or someone who might be sitting in a restaurant with a football game on, who are going to have their eyes on that screen, their eyes on that arena, and their eyes on that stadium. But if we try to close their eyes and if we try to shield from them the change that is actually happening, then it won't occur. And because if we have actual kneeling and the actual type of protest that these people are pushing for and that we are pushing for on side government, we see that we can actually have substantive change going forward because the fans will see it. The people who are just watching a football game just because will see it. The kids in their bedrooms at home hoping for their favorite team to win the game will see what's happening. They will know that a change is being made and they will know that what's happening within our police stations and within our institutions is wrong. And it is on the NFL to be able to push for that change. I'll take your point of information.
Agree that protesting is not part of the primary goal of the NFL. If you disagree, do you mind explaining to the House what's the primary goal of NFL, or the primary objective of NFL?
The primary goal and objective of the NFL is to put some type of entertainment or some type of amusement on for the American people. But just because that is what they do and what they set out to do doesn't mean that protest should not be a part of this movement. What we see is that people have different types of movements together. Say the NFL isn't trying to promote cancer research, yet they let their players wear pink during the month of October because they understand something needs to be done. We understand that there are going to be places where they might do something outside their primary goal because they understand there's a moral obligation to push for change, to push for education, and to push for helping the people who need it most, whether they be cancer patients or whether they be people who have to fight against police brutality and that are afraid to walk around in their neighborhoods with a hoodie on because they don't know if they'll be shot. But I'll take your point of information.
All right. Do you think that if people are divided, entertainment can be achieved?
Yes. Like I said in my first argument, what we saw is that even though people were uncomfortable in restaurants during situations such as sit-ins, even though people were uncomfortable on buses before because we saw people who couldn't sit in the front of the bus sitting in the back, we saw that they still went on to serve their primary purpose after the change has been made. So even though there's a temporary interruption in, say, the joy of your life, know that at the end of the day, you have done something good for someone else. And really, that's what we should be pushing for as the American people, not some type of blissful ignorance that puts the wool over the eyes for the people viewing football. That is our moral obligation. Whether or not it's a practical obligation or a comfortable one does not matter because morally, we should be pushing for positive change. So that brings me to my final argument, which is the issue of morality in today's round, subpoint A. As they brought up, there are many practical objections to doing this. The NFL might lose a little bit of money. People might be uncomfortable while watching a football game. Or even they might say that it's just unpatriotic, subpoint B. But what we see is that protest is a moral good, and also the protest that is being done for these people in these oppressed communities is morally good because it's pushing for restorative justice, which we have fought for in today's round for these people who have been historically oppressed. Subpoint D. It doesn't matter whether or not people are uncomfortable, whether they are offended, because we know that we are pushing for change that can save lives, for change that can make a difference. And that is something that is truly good and something that we should be fighting for. So what have I shown you in today's round? Protest can be uncomfortable, but the change that is a result of it is the best feeling in the world, not just for you, but for the people you are fighting for. And for all of those reasons, we strongly urge that you vote for side affirmation.
Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to say that it's a pleasure for me to stand here in front of you. I want to extend a few thank yous. Thank you for the Rollins team for having us. Thank you, everyone who had the time to attend this debate. And I want to thank you all for being here. Now, today's debate is this House believes that the NFL should allow players to kneel during the anthem. Now, we as the negative side, we're not going to contest or protest the reasons as to why people kneel. We do know the first player who knelt explained himself saying that he's kneeling because of racial injustice and because of police brutality. We're not going to contest that, and we know that these are factors that are present in our society. But the thing that we're going to contest and the thing that we're going to argue is whether or not the NFL is the right medium to do such a protest, is whether or not football is the right way to address some of these issues. Now, as my first speaker said, he said that kneeling is a non-effective way of protest. First of all, we should understand that football and politics are two different things. The issues regarding racial injustice and the issues regarding police brutality are issues of the politics, are issues that the government should deal with. Now, putting them in football simply interferes and messes up the whole purpose of football. Football is a game that is meant to bring people together. Football is a game that is meant to serve as entertainment. Now, if people are showing up such signs and if people are going to mix up politics and football, then the NFL is failing because at this point, it's just not serving what it was meant to do. And again, they say that the NFL has the moral obligation to allow protest because protest is a way of speaking and it's a way of allowing freedom of speech. Yes, Americans do have freedom of speech, and the First Amendment allows freedom of speech. But again, the problem with this protest is that, yes, there is protest. People do the act of kneeling, but what is the change? Whoever is advocating for to stop police brutality, what has been the change? Have we seen the cases of police brutality decreasing after the kneeling? Have we seen the cases of racial discrimination decreasing after protesting? So protesting for the national anthem is simply an act of putting your knee down and nothing is done. Many people want to portray themselves as many people want to be the change on stage, but no one wants to do the background work, which is way harder, which is why it's simply not effective. And as my speaker said, refusing to stand up simply has just brought divisionism and anger between people. We have seen people who support different teams just get angry and mad at each other, and now the viewers of football, viewers of NFL have just decreased simply because of this act that has not even brought change. The affirmative makes an assumption that if we let people protest, if we let people kneel, the world is going to be a better place, America is going to be a better place. As people who are directly connected to racial injustice and discrimination, as they have mentioned, we do know that these things are here, but protesting is definitely not the best form because we have not even seen any change so far. So why should we advocate for something that shows change only on stage but nothing behind the scene? And again, we should acknowledge, I'll take your point later. We should acknowledge that not standing up simply shows disrespect for the people who died fighting for this country. A lot of people have served this country and they have fought for it. Refusing to stand up just because you think you're going to change something, not just because you actually want to change something but you don't do it, is simply a disrespect. A lot of families have been left without fathers because they have died fighting for their country, and kneeling down simply shows disrespect. You simply undermine the work they have done. There are the reasons as to why everybody is here today, and we're just undermining the work that they have done. And we also have to acknowledge that this whole thing of kneeling has been done so many times that at this point it has lost meaning. The first person who started it had the right intentions, and but now at this point it's been doing so many times that it no longer makes any sense. Now people are doing it just because it's trendy. People are doing it just because they are showing support to the person who did it, but nobody actually wants to advocate for it. Now our opponents and then my first speaker asked their speaker, what is the primary goal of NFL? And they said to put some time, and they answered that the primary goal is just to put some time for entertainment and to entertain people. Yes, but if you're allowing something as futile as kneeling to take over this whole purpose of entertainment, then the NFL is simply not doing well. So the reasons as to why we're advocating for NFL to stop people from kneeling is simply because the ones who wanted to protest yes, they protested, but nothing changed. Instead of using football as a way to address these issues, let's just find another medium, and let's just find another medium to address these issues, and let's be able to work it out. If players are truly connected to the problems of racial injustice, let them find another way to address these issues, and let them be ready to be able to do all the hard work that it takes in order for this to change. Otherwise, we do not see the point in making this legal. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. So I'm very happy to be back. The main reason of this debate and the main duty that we had to prove, either the government or the opposition, was if the kneeling is actually effective. And how do you measure the effectiveness of a protest? How do you measure the effectiveness of protesting? Is if it is bringing change in policies, if it is bringing change in the actual actions that are being taken by the government to address social injustice in the society. And up to now, either none of the teams, but we believe we opposed it. But I think the government has not been able to prove to the House if there is any change in policies of people who, of what is actually bringing about social injustices in the society. If there has been no change, then it is not effective. If we are just enjoying to make people uncomfortable and we claim that we are there to give them entertainment, and entertainment plus uncomfortable, then we think that it does not match and it is not really bringing change, so it's not effective. And then the other part was NFL moral obligation. Yes, we, the opposition, we agree that NFL has moral obligation to bring about change. But if the moral obligation forces NFL to go out of its primary objective and its primary goal, then we cannot blame NFL for stopping players from kneeling, because we asked them a point of information. What is the primary goal of NFL? It is to bring about entertainment. But now, if we allow something that is going to make people uncomfortable to watch the game and reducing the viewership by 13%, then we are pushing NFL to the corners of falling down. Instead, it should be something that stands up and holds the American flag, because remember, you're the only people who have the American football. For us, we have soccer. Then NFL is representing America, and now we want it to fall. Now, another thing that the opposition was claiming for was to say that this is not effective way. We should find a better way to do the protesting. We should find another way to help people who are actually directly connected to these social injustices, because those people, they claim to be making millions of dollars, but none of them is actually giving money to help people who are suffering day and night. So if people are just enjoying to kneel because it is trending, if people are just enjoying to kneel because they want to be liked, because they want all the attention on Twitter, then that is useless and it is not helping. It's actually, I don't know how to explain this, but it is actually hurting people who are directly connected to this. Let us play football. Let us enjoy the game, because it's the only way that we can relax and live the life that we are living under this administration that you know better than me. Thank you very much.
Panel of adjudicators and audience members for the floor. Rosa Parks, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King Jr. Audience members, these are the people who fought for civil rights change in the status quo in the 1960s. These are the individuals who did actions that made individuals uncomfortable, did not let change occur overnight, because Rome was not built in one day. But further along the lines of different policy and legislation reform led to the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So, audience members, my first voter for you today is the fact that protest necessarily leads to social change. Hit her too. We've seen it in civil rights history, in women's rights history, with Black Lives Matter slowly over time, and we out to let individuals kneel during the national anthem to further allow change in the future. This is the argument that has been completely unaddressed in today's round, insofar as we can see that we both agree. Therefore, we show you that there is a moral obligation imperative on the National Football League to allow individuals to kneel during the national anthem. Do we agree that the purpose of the NFL is to give entertainment? Yes, but we saw that many corporations and different businesses in the 1960s actually disenfranchised African Americans and other minority groups. Their purposes weren't to allow for different individuals to protest. However, they did have a moral imperative to allow individuals to actually protest and to allow for social change. So with this, let's move forward with the fact that even though some may agree on side opposition that the kneeling is trending, we on side affirmation argue that it is imperative to enact policy change in the future. So the second voter that we'll be talking about in today is the value of restorative justice. Look, audience members, that this argument was simply dropped in today's round and is important because we actually provided a value for you all to weigh on in today's round. That is restorative justice in rectifying the historical injustices in the status quo. We showed you that there might be practical objections. However, we can see that there is necessarily a moral obligation for the NFL to allow individuals to kneel. For this reason, we can see that by enabling restorative justice, we will continuously allow for the individuals who are protesting to have their voices heard in the same way that our civil rights advocates and leaders have, and for those reasons, we will keep kneeling until change comes. So with all this in mind, you'll be voting for side affirmation. Thank you.